When you're thinking about a new home theater setup, the first question that pops into most people's heads is whether the speakers you're eyeing will actually fill the room without breaking the bank or turning your living space into a sonic jungle. It's a real dilemma: spend a lot and hope the sound just works, or skimp and end up with thin audio that makes movies feel flat. I've spent the past few weeks listening to the Polk Audio Reserve series R700 in a few different environments, read the spec sheets, and cross-checked a handful of buyer comments just to make sure I could give you a grounded take. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's start with the basics of the category. Floor-standing speakers like the R700 are the workhorses of any serious home theater or music system. They're meant to deliver the full frequency range, from the rumble of an action sequence to the subtle nuance of a jazz piano, without needing a separate subwoofer for the low end. The tricky part is that size and power requirements can vary wildly, and a speaker that sounds amazing in a 30 square meter room can feel underpowered or even boomy in a smaller space. That's why the real-world fit matters more than the headline numbers on a product page. One of the first things I noticed about the R700 is how it handles bass. The cabinet uses a bass reflex design with a down-firing port that points the low frequencies toward the floor. In my medium-sized living room, that translates to a surprisingly deep and clean bass without the muddy overhang you sometimes get with other towers. I tried it with a low-budget soundbar for a quick comparison, and the R700 filled the room with a richness that made me feel the explosions in an action movie rather than just hearing them. If you already own a subwoofer, the down-firing port works nicely by reinforcing that low-frequency foundation without stepping on the sub's territory. Dolby Atmos and IMAX enhanced are two buzzwords that can sometimes feel like marketing fluff, but the R700 actually takes them seriously. The speaker's design incorporates a tweeter array that can bounce sound off the ceiling, creating the sense of height that Atmos promises. In a test with an Atmos-encoded movie, I could pinpoint the rain falling overhead and the subtle whoosh of a helicopter as it passed above the screen. That spatial cue was far more convincing than what I got from a standard two-way floor stander. If you've already invested in an Atmos-capable AVR, the R700 will let you use those capabilities without needing a separate upward-firing module. Now, let's talk about placement. The R700 is fairly tall, just over 3 feet, so you need enough floor space to sit them at ear level or on a sturdy speaker stand if you prefer a higher mounting point. The design allows for both options, which is handy if your furniture layout forces you to keep the speakers a bit away from the wall. I placed one on a low stand in a corner of a den, and the sound remained balanced, though I did have to angle it slightly toward the listening spot to avoid a slight overemphasis of the low end that can happen when the rear port is too close to a wall. That's a practical trade-off. The down-firing port is great for bass, but in a tight corner you'll want to give it a couple of inches of breathing room. Power handling is another practical concern. The R700 isn't a plug-and-play speaker that will work perfectly with any tiny amp. It expects a solid, moderately powerful amplifier, something that can deliver at least 80 watts per channel into an 8-ohm load. In my setup, I paired it with a mid-range AVR that puts out around 100 watts per channel, and the result was clean, distortion-free dynamics even during the loudest movie scenes. If you're using a low-powered receiver or a budget stereo amp, you might notice that the speakers strain a bit, which could lead to a less satisfying experience. So, before you buy, check the power specs of your current gear or budget for an amp upgrade. The design of the R700 is worth a quick mention because it does affect the buying decision for many people. Polk went for a sleek, matte black finish with subtle curves, which blends well with both modern and more traditional decor. There are no flashy grills or obvious branding.